Welcome to How to Create a Digital Pattern. For this project, you will need your 128 triangles as a JPEG, which you will open on your desktop. You'll also need your basic photo editing software, whatever comes with your computer. On mine, it's called Preview. And you'll also need Keynote. Or PowerPoint. It's Keynote if you're using a Mac, but you can easily use PowerPoint. If you don't have Keynote or PowerPoint, I use Pages. Word is an option, but I will share with you that I have heard from students that tried to use Word that they were unsuccessful in aligning elements for their pattern successfully, that Word only allowed them to get them ever so closely, but there's still a gap in between. So I recommend using Pages if you have it, or PowerPoint or Keynote. So for this demonstration, I'm going to have my 128 triangles here, as you see, and then I'm also going to have Keynote up, and I'll open that later. So I'm here in my basic photo editing software. It's called Preview. I have my 128 triangles open as a JPEG. And if I look here at the top bar, if you're not sure what your photo editing software is, if I look at the top navigation bar and I scroll over to the left, it's called Preview. So you'll have a name that pops up so you'll know what software you're using. So this is my JPEG image of my 128 triangles. And first what I want to do is I want to copy this. Because I'm going to choose one of these rectangles that have two triangles in them, I want to copy my document first, my image first, so I don't ruin my JPEG, which might be my only copy. Right, so I'm going to go to the top bar, I'm going to Tools. Actually, I'm going to File. So I'm going to File, I scroll down and it says Duplicate. So I'm going to click Duplicate, and a new window pops open. And at the end of it, it says copy. So I'm going to go to my original and close that. And I have my copy here. I'm going to look at my 128 triangles. And as you see that this image that I have is incomplete, I will have to upload a new image and do a new demonstration soon. But right now, this is what I'm working with. And I'm going to choose this pattern here in the top row, the fifth rectangle from the left. I have found that in creating digital patterns, if you have two triangles that are within your rectangle and one is darker than the other, it creates nice borders and creates nice elements. And you know, line designs with curved lines in them create interesting patterns. But you know, choose whatever you want, but try to find something where there's a contrast and value. We've been talking about value up to this point. So let's try to choose a line design that has value. So I'm going to choose this one. So you'll notice as I put my cursor over the top left corner of the rectangle, my cursor turns into a plus sign or a cross. So I'm going to click my mouse, and we see that it now turns into a double end arrow. There is a blue dot that has now appeared, which means it's activated. I'm going to pull this dot down to the bottom right corner. And what's happening here is I've now created a crop box. There is a rectangle around my rectangle, and it is moving in a counterclockwise direction, and it's showing that it's activated. And I'm going to go to the top bar, to Tools, and I'm going to scroll down to Crop, and I'm going to choose Crop. And let's crop the image. I can keep the title, or I can click this arrow, and I'm going to just rename this Element 1. You can use any name you want. And I'm going to save it on my desktop. And this is where it is. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to open it again. And when I open it, you'll find that it's going to be much larger in scale, and I now can see it a little more clearly. And I'm going to drag the bottom right corner so it's much larger, and I can see that I have this line here that's going across the top and down the right side. I'm going to crop this one more time to take out that unnecessary line, because that's going to exist within my pattern and create, you know, some type of line in the pattern that I've learned up to this point that I don't want. You might want to keep yours so you can see what it does, but I believe you're going to want that out. So I'm going to crop this a little more just to clean it up. And for me, I'm going to take out this little white section as well. So I'm going to reduce my scale a little more, but you know, I'm going to keep this one in. Let's keep it in. So since this is your first time, you can see what happens when we have these little inconsistencies. Maybe it'll create something interesting, but I definitely want this top black line and the black line on the right to be eliminated from this design. So I'm going to go back to my toolbar and I'm going to crop it. And now this looks much cleaner. Okay. So I am going to reduce that and I'm going to open up my PowerPoint. So my PowerPoint right now is really large. It's at 131% scale. So I'm going to change it to 100 so I can see it. And the slide itself is horizontal, but I have this bar here that's vertical, right? But I want to change my slide to a vertical orientation. It's going to just work well for me, the way that my pattern is going to unfold. And so if you're able, I recommend changing your slide to a vertical orientation. So I go to Document in Keynote, and I go down to Slide Size, and I'm going to go to Custom Slide, and it's showing me the width and the height. So I want mine to be approximately 8.5 by 11 as if it were a sheet of copy paper. And so I've already looked it up, and that height would be in points, 612, because points converts to inches. And then the width would be 798 if I'm correct. And I'm going to open up this document. I believe that's it. 612 to 792. So 792. And I click OK. And now my slide is, oh, it should be vertical. What happened? Let's see here. Did I put it in the wrong spot? Oh, I did it in the wrong place. I want my height to be the longest end, and my width is going to be 612. There we are. There we are. And I'm going to make sure this is at 100%. There we are. So I have this box here where I can put images or text, and I'm going to keep this because this is going to help me create a border. It's going to help me keep a nice border because this is a design class and we want things to be aligned. And I have this here, and I'm going to click Add Slide, and it's going to duplicate this slide for me, okay? And I could also do that by copying it with a shortcut. For me, it's Command-C, and then pasting more, okay? And I know that we're going to create about a total of 8 pages of design. So I have 6 here, 7, and 8. Okay, excellent. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to create a how to make a pattern sheet. So I'm going to select text, and I'm going to create my title. And once you make this, these steps will teach you everything you know about making a pattern. And it's going to make your pattern making very easy. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag over our element. So I'm grabbing it here from my desktop, and I'm just dragging it over to my document. And it is huge, right? It is large. And actually, yeah, it's large. So I'm going to put it inside my frame here, and I'm just going to drag it from the bottom right corner to a smaller scale. And that's the first element. I can call this single element. And I'm going to change my text here. I'm going to make it smaller. And it doesn't need to be bold. Possibly, we'll see. I'm going to drag this here. This is my single element. Now we want to copy this element and we want to create a repeat. So I'm highlighting my element. I can go to edit and copy it, or I can use the shortcut, which is Command C. Okay, so I'm going to do Command C and then Command V for paste, and I have a new element. And I'm going to do that one more time. And I'm going to put them side by side. If you need to move something closer, you highlight that element and you can use your right or left arrows. Okay. And if you want to confirm that they are aligned, I'm hitting my Shift key and tapping each element, and then I can go to Arrange, Align Objects, and Middle, and it'll make sure that they are aligned to the middle, or you can align them to the top or the bottom. So I'm going to also group this. I'm going to hit the Shift key, click both of these, go to Arrange in my toolbar, and group them so they are one element, and now I can move them and they're side by side. Okay? So this is my single element with a repeat. And I'm going to move this right on top of this. You can also group your text and your images. Eventually, you might need to move these around. If you want this to be one element, you hit down your Shift key, tap your element and your text, and go to Arrange and Group. And now it is one element, and I can move this all around. Okay, I'm going to ungroup this because I need this element. So we have a single element, and now we needed a single element with a repeat. So we're also going to need a single element with a repeat and a horizontal flip. So I make a copy of my element. I'm going to make one more copy of it. I'm going to put it side by side. And this one on the right that's now highlighted, I'm going to go to Format, and I'm going to, Arrange, and I'm going to flip horizontally. So look what's happened. This really great image has occurred. This one element now repeated creates this really interesting geometric and organic, geometric shape with these kind of organic lines happening in it. Really interesting. So I'm gonna hit down my Shift key, select both of those, go to Arrange and Group, and I now have my single element with a repeat and a horizontal flip. I'm just gonna actually copy this since all the formatting is correct. Single element with a repeat and horizontal flip. Excellent. I'll do the same thing one more time. I'm going to copy my element. I might move this up a bit. Give myself a little bit more space. And now we're going to do a vertical flip. We're going to take this, copy it, put it underneath, go to Arrange, and flip vertically. Okay? And we're going to group that together. So we're now going to put these new elements. This is now a new element that's comprised of two rectangles, right? So it's now one new element, and we're going to do an additional flip. So we're going to copy this to create our new pattern. We're going to copy it one more time, and we're going to flip this vertically. And we have our new pattern, because we know that a pattern consists of repetition, a repeated element, right? That is within an interesting, that has interesting intervals, right? So I now have this pattern with my, with my I'm grouping it together with my horizontal and vertical flip. And I'm going to scoot this one over here a bit. And I also want a pattern with just my single element repeated 4 times. So we have 1, 2, I'll use my arrow to scoot that over. And we'll copy both of those. And I'm going to group all those together. And there we are. So I have my single element. I have an element, single element with a repeat. I have a single element, and you see this horizontal line here? We want this to get closer. So let me ungroup this. I'm going to just highlight the bottom element, and I'm going to use my top arrow to move it up a little bit. I'll group this. Let me identify it. Just going to copy this text. I'll regroup this. And I'm keeping everything grouped, so when I move them around, it's easy to navigate. So this is with repeat and vertical flip. And we're still thinking about design, right? So I can do something here. What if I want to make sure that all of these things, all of these objects are aligned? I can click this single element with a repeat, and then the single element with a repeat and a vertical flip. I go to Arrange, Align Objects, Top, and it'll make sure they're all aligned. Okay, go back and group these. Again, I'm using my Shift key and clicking them to make sure that they are both highlighted. Excellent. And then I have this here. And this is single element with a repeat. We'll put in here, no flip. And then this is single element with repeat, horizontal, and we'll just do slash, vertical flip as pattern. Okay, there we are. We'll group this. So you've now just made 2 patterns, one with a repeated single element that has no flip whatsoever, and a pattern that has a horizontal and a vertical flip. This, how to create a digital pattern that you've just created, is the basis for all of your projects. All of your projects, okay? So we'll do the same thing here. And don't worry about this text. You'll find that once you play this as a slideshow, for example, that the text disappears, okay? So we're not worried about that. Okay, I'm going to now create my first pattern. And my first pattern is a single repeat. So I have my new slide, and I'm going to drag my element over. And I'm going to grab it by the bottom right corner, and I'm going to reduce the scale. And I'm going to copy it and put it right next to each other. And then I'm going to do that. I'm going to group these two. And I'm going to make a copy of this. And I will group these two sets. And our first pattern consists of 16 rectangles. So I just need 4 rows of 4. So I will drag this so it's aligned with my text box, or my image box rather. And I now have 1 row of 4 that is a group. And I can simply copy and paste and make sure it's aligned. There's no white line between here, right? It's right up against the first pattern. Copy and paste. I'll do the same here. And if I want to make sure, I just use my little arrow and copy and paste again. And to make sure that they're all aligned, I can highlight them all, go to Arrange, Align, Center. So when your elements are stacked vertically, you do Align, Center. When they are horizontal, it's Align, Middle. Okay, so I now have my first pattern. I can group this. So it's now one element and I can center it, right, the way I like. If I want, I have this text here. It's not going away, but we should be fine. We'll be fine. Okay, so that's my first pattern. Easy breezy. I now go to my second slide, or my third slide rather, and I drag my element over, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag it by the bottom right corner so it's a smaller scale. And I'm going to make a copy of it using my shortcut, Command C, Command V for paste. And I'm going to put it as close to it as I can get. There's a little line here, a little white line, and I'm just going to use my left arrow to get it closer. And I'm going to flip this because now we want one with a horizontal flip. There we are. I'm going to group these two. I'm going to copy it and paste it. Put it right next to each other, use my arrow. Excellent. I'm going to group these two elements. And I'm going to drag it so it hits the border. And now, remember when I talked about editing cleanly and I left those little white marks? Now we see what's happening and we're going to see those white marks reveal themselves. So I might not like that. It might look a little messy in my design. Maybe it creates some type of interesting element. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to continue. I've grouped these 4 rectangles, which are now each 2 new elements. And I'm going to copy it and put it right underneath the other one. And there's a little line there. I'm going to use my top arrow to make sure it's aligned. And I can even do something like this. I can press my shift key, highlight this row, highlight that row because I know I need 4, make a copy, and look at that. And I'm going to use my arrow to bring it up. Perfect. So look at my design. I love what's happening. I think it's very interesting, but I have to tell you, I am not a fan of this little white section here. I'm not a fan. So what I should have done, and I'll go back to do, I'm going to finish this demonstration, but I will go back and edit the element so that is gone. So that is gone. So I'm going to group these 4 together. So it's one element and oops, oh, look at that. Sometimes that happens. So this is one. I'm going to use my down arrow to make sure they're really close. There we are. So that's, let's see here. Oh, it grouped with the background. Look at that. Now that's interesting. That's new to me. Let's see here. I'm going to ungroup this. These things happen. This is why we learn, right? And that was too close. So I'm going to group this bottom one. That's grouped. I'm going to ungroup this. Okay, here we are. That was strange. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here to make sure those are together. One more. I'm going to scroll down here to make sure these are close. Excellent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Arrange, group, So now one there. Look at this. Interesting. Something's happening here. Oh, I have that little box there. I'm going to slide this in here. There we are. So that's one little element. This is one. I'm going to group this together. There we are. And now I have my repeated shape with a horizontal flip. 16 rectangles, 8 new elements. What do I mean by that? So we still have our 16 rectangles. Let me get this drawing annotation available. So we started off with one rectangle, and this is our element, one, right? Here's our second rectangle. Together, right, these are two different elements, but together, right, this is one. Clean that up a little bit. This was one element, right? Just this one element. And we copied it and flipped it. So we have two rectangles, but now that element has become a new element, which is this. It's now one new element on its own. So we still have 16 rectangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, but we also have 8 new elements. This is now its own element. So this is one, excuse me. Counting backwards here. So this is now 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, right? Because this now, as I showed earlier, is its own element. 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So we still have 16 rectangles and 8 new elements, okay? There we are. So I'm gonna do something. We've now seen, if we go back to this one, no, this one, we see what happens with that little mark there. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna clean that up. I'm gonna open up that element again. The computer's running a little slow, bear with me. Here it is. And I'm going to recrop this. I think in my impatience, I might have clicked that a few times. Okay, so I'm going to open this up. I'm going to recrop it. And I'm going to take that out. So it's going to change the size a little bit. Right, I'm taking that out. And let's see what happens when I take that out with a new design. So now I'm going to, we have our pattern with a repeated single element. We have our pattern with a single element that's been flipped horizontally. And now we're going to take this new element with this horizontal flip and flip it vertically. Okay, so I'm going to my new slide. I have my new element here. I'm going to reduce the scale by dragging the bottom right corner towards the top left to make it smaller. I'm going to copy and paste, use my left arrow to get it close. And I'm going to go to arrange, flip horizontally. I'm going to group this. And now I'm going to copy this new element, put it right underneath. And I'm going to flip this vertically. Let's see what happens. Okay. I'm going to group this. So it's one element, and I'm going to copy and paste it. And it only needs to be, again, 16 rectangles. So I'm going to group these 4, and then I'm going to drag this over. Excellent. And then I will copy and paste this. And look at this. Ooh, I like it. Very interesting design. And look what happened. I cleaned that middle out, that middle image out, those little discrepancies that I didn't like, and now look how clean it is. It's much better. So I'm going to group this. Okay. So this is our, and we can create a title here. This is our pattern with a singular repeated element. And the title that I'm writing now might be slightly different than what's on the project page, but it's okay. A pattern with a single element repeated or something. This is our, I'm going to copy this. This is our pattern with a singular repeated element, and I'll make this a little smaller. A horizontal flip, not a flip. And then this is our pattern with the vertical flip. Now look at that. We have now a pattern. We have a singular element that's been repeated, and there are some interesting changes within the pattern, right? The pattern is being flipped, and we've now created a pattern. This pattern can now be repeated at a reduced scale, and we will start to see the rhythm and the energy, the vibes that these patterns generate. So we're going to do this vertical and horizontal. Let me add horizontal here because there are 2. One more time. But what are we going to do that's a little different? So we're looking at this pattern, and this pattern stops within the frame, within the border that we've created. Now we want to create a pattern that's expanding past the border, okay? So we are going to do what? We are going to, now I keep dragging this element over, but to make things very easy, if you want, you can just take one of these elements, right? But I'm going to drag this over. I'm going to reduce the scale. And this time, if we look here, our pattern starts with the element in its original position, right? This is the original position of the pattern, of the element, excuse me. So this time we're going to flip this horizontally. And we're now going to start with it flipped. And what happens when we do that? We're going to copy it. And then we're going to change this one back to its original orientation. Okay. Look at that, they're perfectly together. So we're going to group this. So again, now we're starting with the element flipped, and then next to it is the element is in its original orientation. We're going to copy it and put that next to each other. I'm going to use my little arrow to make sure it's close, and I still see this fine line, so I want to make sure it's together. If you need help in seeing things close, remember you can always change your scale, right? I just changed it to 150. So you can always change your scale by zooming in. I'm going to group these 2, and let's see what happens now that I've started my pattern with the element flipped. So we can already see, we see half of the element on either side. And what does that do? That extends our pattern to the outside. So you can do it a couple ways. You can do it with a horizontal flip only, or horizontal and vertical. And I'm going to do a horizontal and vertical flip. Oops. There we are. Is that too far over? There we are. And I'm going to group these two. Actually, I think it can go up once more. There we are. Let me group these two. And then I'm going to copy this entire group. Excellent, and look what happens. This is now our pattern with a horizontal and vertical flip, and look at the pattern now. It's extending outside of the frame. It's an interesting pattern. It seems larger than what it normally is because it's extending outside of the frame. And we know that in design, when line designs and the design extend outside the frame, it suggests something more and expansive. And here's the original one, right? So this is the pattern with a single repeated element with a horizontal and a vertical flip. And now we have it extending beyond the frame, okay? Or the edge. And I think on the assignment page, I might have referred to it as extending beyond the edge, and I'll call it the edge, right? I love this, look at this. So you're making 4 patterns that are 16 rectangles each. Now you have 3 more, and you're gonna reduce the scale. This is 4 by 4, right? 4 rectangles across, 4 rectangles down. Now you're gonna reduce the scale by half, where you have 8 rectangles across and 8 rectangles down, which means you have 64 rectangles. So you can choose any pattern that you want. I'm going to just go to the singular repeated element. I'm going to copy it. Oops, let's see what happens here. Copy this. All right. I'm going to reduce the scale. I don't have my, that one. Let's see, I'll do it on this one. I didn't have my margin. I'm going to copy it and paste it right next to each other. It looks like that's right. And then I'm going to group these. And I'm going to minimize it a bit, reduce it so it fits inside there. And I'm going to copy that. I'll group this. Make sure all of these are centered. Now we have our reduced scale pattern, okay? So I'm gonna copy this text. We have our pattern with a singular repeated element, reduced scale. 64 rectangles. All right. You're going to do that 2 more times. You're going to choose any pattern that you want. Any pattern that you want. So I'm going to choose, let's see. I'm going to choose, I'll choose this one. You can do as many as you want. And you know, I find some students, they really get into this. This is a really awesome project, and they start creating all sorts of designs with their singular element. So I'm going to paste this here. I'm going to drag it and reduce the scale. I'm going to copy it, put it here next to it, use my arrow. Ah, now this is the one with that line design in it, that little, excuse me, not line design, that little, those indiscrepancies. So I'm not going to use that. I don't want to see that. I'm going to do this. Well, you know, I'm going to do that. Let me do that one. Let me take that back. I'm going to do this one so you can see what it looks like over a larger plane and why I probably wouldn't want to use it. And then I'll do one of the others. And I'm going to get this close. Okay. Looks a little wider. There we are. Now group this. And I will reduce it so it fits inside my border. And I'll make sure it's aligned by going to Arrange, Align Objects, Center. There we saw it align. And I'm going to highlight both and group it. Make sure it's centered. Excellent. This is the horizontal flip. I put that in parentheses. There we are. Reduce the scale. Reduced scale, 64 rectangles. And then my final design, I don't have my text box here, and I'm gonna do one without it. And some of you might not like using that, so we'll see. Copy it. There we are. I'm going to group it. And it's centered. All right, centered. You don't have to use those lines. And make sure those are touching. Beautiful. Group them both together. Look at that. Now let's look at this again. And we have that indiscrepancy. And it just, I think, takes your eye away from the design. Although it repeats and it becomes its own little element within the design, it's clearly a mistake, right? It's not one, and I'm all for learning from and being inspired by indiscrepancies and things that we can identify as a mistake, but it does not work in this pattern. And we see that here it's much cleaner, right? So this is our text smaller. Reduce scale, 64 rectangles. So I'm going to make this a little smaller so my text fits better. Ooh, so look at that. Something interesting happened. I'm not sure what's happening here. Let's see. Ungroup. So something happened when I reduced the scale. I'm going to ungroup this and ungroup it one more time. This is one of the reasons also why I like using the margin, because it also allows me to work within a frame. And I didn't have any of those issues until I started not using the margin. You guys are going to want to work the way that is comfortable to you, but something about just having those margins already there made it easy for me to work with. So I'm regrouping here. And let me go back and make sure I have the right number. So yes, that is 8 across. All right, I'm going to group all of these together and make sure it's centered. So this is centered, excellent. And that is my last pattern. So we have our how to create a digital pattern. And you see that everything we did here are the skills you need to make your other patterns. We have our singular reduced element pattern. We have our pattern with a singular repeated element with a horizontal flip and our discrepancy. We have our pattern with a singular repeated element in a horizontal and a vertical flip. And we have our pattern with a singular repeated element with a horizontal and vertical flip. Oh, and look at, I spelled horizontal wrong here. Horizontal. Extending beyond the edge. And then we have our reduced scale. Singular repeated element, singular repeated element with a horizontal flip with the discrepancy. And then our singular repeated element with a horizontal and vertical flip that is extending beyond the edge. And it is a reduced scale. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I think you're going to really love this project. And I look forward to seeing your results. I look forward to seeing your creativity. I look forward to hearing how your process, any challenges that you encountered, any joys, any happy surprises. I just look forward to hearing and hearing about your experience and seeing your work. Alrighty, I will see you in class. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. Bye.